Spare a thought for the children of old Belfast town, who in their young lives were cruelly shot down by bullets of plastic fired by foreign hands, from a weapon so drastic it's banned in many lands. So sleep, little children, through sunshine and snow. The Belfast winds whisper that now you must go.
The purpose of the video, as we see it, has at least three main objectives. One, of course, is to carry on the campaign against plastic bullets. The second one is through relatives, mothers, fathers, husbands of people that have been killed, using them to break down the myths of the usual official establishment line that is fed generally through the use of the mass media to portray a certain impression. The people involved know the difference between the reality of what is happening and what the official line says is happening. Probably the most consistent line running through all the interviews of people that have been personally affected through the use of this plastic bullet weapon is that they're all left with a sense of complete isolation and frustration. They're left living within a state and a society that to their minds has committed the ultimate immorality in killing someone that has been close to them. And their experience tells that the very same structures of the same state are then used to deny them any redress at all. You'll find a consistent line of disenchantment with the judicial system, with a lack of public accountability of the actions of either the RUC or the British Army. They have been denied any public forum to express those views, and underneath everything they say, you'll find this urge to talk and a desire to tell people. Because probably the hardest thing to come to terms with is the fact that the state can quite openly kill people on the streets and very often kill the weakest and the most vulnerable part of society, that is children, a transgression of a universal morality in any society. And that the state then uses their own structures and the machinations built within that state to cover up their own act.
In 1967, the police in Hong Kong, a British colony, developed a method of striking demonstrators with a wooden baton round. It was made of teak, weighted with a metal core and fired from a gun. It could cause serious injuries, both from impact and splintering. However, despite this and the killing of a girl, they were regarded as a success by the British authorities. The next year, 1968, on October the 5th, a civil rights march was viciously attacked by the RUC, the Royal Ulster Constabulary, in Derry City. The civil rights demonstrators were calling for one man, one vote, and equality of employment and housing, which were denied to the Catholic nationalist community by the Loyalist government of Northern Ireland. The television cameras were there, and for the first time relayed to a startled and amazed worldwide audience an exposition of the blatant sectarianism of the Stormont government and its agents, the RUC. The campaign intensified. On the 1st of January the following year, a small group of students, members of the Civil Rights Association, left Belfast to march to Derry. At Burntollet Bridge, they were attacked by a group of B Specials, the Loyalist Police Reserve, who were organised but felt it necessary not to wear their uniforms. The RUC stood by. When the march eventually reached Derry, they were again attacked by Loyalists and the RUC. The Bogside area of the city threw up barricades. They resisted the police baton charges, water cannon attacks, and a bombardment of CS gas. The Battle of the Bogside lasted a week, and the world watched. Because of the adverse publicity the RUC were getting, and the relative unreliability of the wooden baton round developed in Hong Kong, it was felt by the authorities that its introduction would not be opportune. The British government's chemical research establishment at Porton Down conducted a crash programme to produce a projectile, which was thought to have a more acceptable image, the rubber bullet. It was 6 inches long, 1.5 inches in diameter, and weighed 5 ounces. It was first introduced in the New Lodge area of Belfast in August 1970. The nationalist demands for reform did not slacken, and their nationalist aspirations grew. This severely threatened the stability of the Stormont government. Prime Minister Faulkner sought and received military support from the British government to introduce internment. On the 9th of August 1971, hundreds of nationalists were rounded up and imprisoned without trial. Internment was to last for the next 4 years. The 9th of August was to be remembered by the nationalist population. Raids by the British Army became commonplace as the numbers of those imprisoned rose from hundreds to thousands. Emma Groves, a resident of Andersonstown in Belfast, tells of such a raid.
Well, it was on the 4th of November of 1971, and the British Army had been in the district raiding houses in the early hours of the morning, which is the usual time for the British Army to raid houses anyway, like. So all the children had to be got out of bed, and the army just went through the whole house, ransacking, pulling everything apart. And as I'm the mother of 11 children, and the youngest at that time was 5, it was very annoying, and the children were very upset. But during that time, they had been arresting a few of the men in the street. So one of the men 2 doors from me had been arrested, and he was the father of 4 or 5 young children. And the children were in a very bad state, and the wee wife was crying. So I ran down to see what I could do and give her some tea and tablets and tried to comfort her and the children. And then I heard, oh, here's the powers in. And they were in all right, because they came in with a lot of aggression and ordered everybody into their own homes. So I had to leave the wee woman and go back up into my own house. So we were all put under house arrest. And a soldier was put in every doorway. And I've been told later that the whole district was actually surrounded by the powers, and there was nobody getting in or out of the district. So I just pulled up the finishing blinds, which everybody else in the street had done, where I was looking over the opposite side of the street, and we're all standing looking out of our windows. And it was very, very frustrating to watch, because they were trailing young men and boys from their homes, some in their bare feet, some with just their shirts and trousers on, and it was very, as I say, very frustrating to watch. Didn't know whether to scream or cry or what to do, for you seemed so helpless. And so I said to my daughter, for God's sake, put on a record or something to build up our morale, because this is terrible. So she put on the record, Four Green Fields, and it was only playing minutes, and it's a very nice Irish ballad, the Four Green Fields. And the bullet comes through the window and it shot me, and I lost both eyes. So, like, my whole children, the youngest were 5 and experienced all this, so it was horrific for them to have to put up with that. Well, anyway, I was taken to the hospital and nothing could be done because both my eyes were completely destroyed. And at the minute, and since I have been wearing artificial eyes, the bullet, you see, must have just skimmed across my eyes and this part of my nose. This is all plastic surgery. And so when I was told in the hospital that I would never see again, I just wanted to die.
The British had now developed a two-pronged attack on the nationalists. The first, imprisonment without trial. The second, the use of weapons to terrorise the population to implement the former. Between 1970 and 1975, when rubber bullets were withdrawn, 3 people were killed and countless injured. It has been argued that rubber and plastic bullets are safer than lead bullets. However, it must be remembered that it is not a policy of rubber and plastic bullets instead of lead bullets, but a policy of rubber and plastic bullets and lead bullets. Despite the increasing use of rubber bullets, more and more people demonstrated against internment. A large rally was called on Sunday the 30th of January 1972 in Derry.
Now, get down, get down.
14 innocent people were killed by lead bullets. A study carried out by 4 surgeons from the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast on rubber bullet victims was severely critical of their use. 3 of the cases were of severe brain damage. One of these was Francis Rowntree, aged 11, who died on the 23rd of April 1972 after being struck on the head by a rubber bullet 3 days before at Divis Flats. It was fired by a soldier of the Royal Anglian Regiment from inside a Saracen armoured vehicle. Eyewitnesses said that the bullet had been doctored. It had been hacked in half, with a torch battery replacing the missing half.
Well, whenever Frank was killed, it was 1972, and he was the first one killed with these rubber bullets. And at that time, nobody ever thought that they would kill, that anybody could be killed with them. They were only a deterrent for riot situations. But when Frank was killed with it, the doctors in the Royal Hospital and a lot of people were concerned at the time, and they said that the damage that was done to him with this, that they would maybe try and get them banned. But they've brought in these other ones, which is even more lethal. And the Mr. Rutherford, the surgeon in the Royal, said that there was absolutely no chance of saving him, but Frank, because his whole brain was damaged and his eyesight was, he would have been blind if he had survived it.
In the summer of 1972, the Belfast surgeons handed the report over to Army surgeons. The Army suppressed it, publishing it as a restricted document for internal use. It was not until the Sunday Times published a leaked account of it in May 1973 that the surgeons were finally told they could publish without the risk of prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. 2 more people were to die from rubber bullets. Tobias Malloy from Strabane was struck in the heart in the early hours of Sunday the 16th of July 1972 by a rubber bullet fired at point-blank range by soldiers near a British Army checkpoint on the border. He was returning across the border from a dance in County Donegal. Some youths had been throwing stones at the soldiers, but Tobias's friends said that he had nothing to do with the trouble. Rubber bullets were fired during his funeral procession, injuring a woman and 2 youths. Thomas Friel, aged 21, was hit on the head at around midnight on the 17th of May 1973 by a rubber bullet fired by British soldiers. Thomas was on his way home to the Cregan Heights in Derry with his brother, who said that, although there had been rioting earlier, the area was quiet at the time of the shooting. Rubber bullets were eventually phased out and replaced by plastic bullets. Some observers have said that this was due to the public outcry and the publication of the surgeon's report. Others have said that rubber bullets were withdrawn because they were unstable in flight and therefore unpredictable, dangerous, and likely to hit and kill innocent bystanders. No doubt public outrage and bad publicity does affect the British government, but the chief reason for the introduction of the plastic bullet was its accuracy, not because it was safer. By the end of July 1981, there had been 1 death for every 4,000 plastic rounds fired, compared with 1 for every 18,000 rubber ones. Exactly 4.5 times more accurate, dangerous, and deadly. The plastic round is slightly lighter in weight and shorter in length than the rubber bullet, but it is harder, and unlike the rubber round, is fired directly at the person. The rubber round was supposed to be ricocheted off the ground in front of a rioter. The plastic round leaves the riot gun at an appreciably higher speed than the rubber bullet. It is about the same weight as a cricket ball and fired at about twice the speed of the fastest fast bowler. Cricket batsmen, strong and extremely fit athletes, face such a bowler with a crash helmet, extensive padding and a box. They defend themselves with a bat and have 2 umpires to make sure the bowler does not fire the ball at their person. Stephen Geddes was the first to die after being struck by a plastic bullet. Like Francis Rowntree, the first person to be killed by a rubber bullet, he was fired upon by the Royal Anglian Regiment near his home at Divis Flats in Belfast. A very quiet child, he had refused to go outside for 3 weeks since returning from an NSPCC-sponsored trip to America. On the 28th of August 1975, his father persuaded him to go out to play. About 50 yards from where he was playing, an army patrol were attempting to remove 2 cushions which some boys had set fire to in the road. The boys stoned the soldiers, one of whom gave chase and fired a plastic round. Stephen fell to the ground with a head wound. Eyewitnesses emphatically deny Stephen was involved. He died 2 days later. He was 10 years old. On the 4th of October 1976, Brian Stewart left his homework, nipped out of the house to buy sweets at a nearby corner shop. He was standing outside the shop with a small group of children when a British Army foot patrol was passing. A plastic round was discharged and Brian fell to the ground. 6 days after Brian was shot, he died. He was aged 13. His mother, Mrs. Kathleen Stewart.
The following day, a major appeared on television being interviewed. He said that Brian was the ringleader of a rioting mob of 400 and he had watched them for a considerable time and they shot at a specific target. At the inquest, the same major that came out with the statement on television said that Brian was standing with a group of 15 youths and that Brian wasn't the target that the shot was aimed at, but a tall youth with a blue and white strip jumper, which contradicted the interview that went out over the television. Overnight, my family became terrorists. My son became a terrorist, and the army harassed me and my children whenever they went out in the street. In fact, at one point in time, they beat me up about the face and I lost all my teeth. My 15-year-old
daughter was arrested and brought to Castlereagh. My 17-year-old daughter was arrested, my husband was arrested, my son was arrested, and there was no charges at any time because we weren't involved in any organisations or interested in politics. I took out a civil action against the soldier that shot Brian, and in the court there was only the soldier that shot him, a witness for the Ministry of Defence, and he said that they were being harassed by 250. So this was a contradictory story again, and he didn't know the instructions of firing the plastic bullet gun. This was 5 years after my son had been murdered, and I thought that was terrible, but the judge commended him on being a very competent soldier, although he didn't know the instructions of firing a plastic bullet. I mean, I know my son was innocent. I know there was no riot at the time that he was shot. I know that I didn't get justice going through the courts.
Michael Donnelly, who lived in the university area of the city, was a dedicated community worker. In the early hours of the morning of the 9th of August 1980, he heard of rioting in the vicinity of his mother's home in the Falls area of the city on a local radio. His mother had been ill, so he decided, even at that late hour, to try to get across the city to see if his mother was all right. Deliberately avoiding a British Army roadblock, he went a roundabout route, but came across a foot patrol who were firing plastic rounds indiscriminately down Leeson Street. He was struck and died almost instantly from lacerations and bruising to his left lung. Michael was 21. His mother, Mrs. Mary Donnelly.
Michael was, well, he was jolly, he was good. He was a good sport. And he done that helping with the welfare, that welfare handicaps, teenagers and stuff like that. And at that particular time it was helping out with, the battered ways children. And he done a lot of work for them. And they sort of way down and outs at that particular time. They had a place open for the down and outs that worked through the night, give them and dinner and stuff. I think it's closed down now. And going to different welfare centres and helping out there.
By now, the British government was ruling Northern Ireland directly from Westminster. Internment was replaced by a criminalisation policy implemented through the Diplock courts. Prisoners convicted under this system refused to accept the new prison regime, and this eventually led to deteriorating conditions within the prison. The prisoners felt that the only weapon they could use to argue their case and achieve their demands was the hunger strike. This had serious repercussions outside in the community, where, as its sense of frustration and concern grew, demonstrations, pickets and civil disobedience became more frequent. The government began to feel seriously threatened. The role of the RUC was increased in order to challenge community anger. Riot guns were used more and more to quieten the nationalist population.
Who can tell? Brits and police, they walk the streets, spreading hatred like disease. I live in a town where they shoot the people down, men and women, children too. Plastic bullets shot at you. Many weapons they've used on them. but they do not comprehend that force and might on anyone brings thousands more against that gun. I live in a town where they shoot the people down, men and women, children too.
Paul Withers, aged 15, was struck by a plastic bullet on the 15th of April 1981. He died 10 days later.
Now, most people that have been killed, as I said, in usually non-violent situations, or minor outbursts, or minor protests. My own son was throwing stones, and that I stand up and immediately accept. What I can never accept, and never will accept, is that the sentence for throwing stones should be summary execution. It happened in 1981, time of high tension, hunger strikes were in the offing. In fact, I suppose I was a fairly conservative-minded in the political sense. I would have followed a middle-of-the-road party, more or less. Paul, nor his brother, to my knowledge or to my wife's knowledge, was ever involved in rioting. In fact, we were afraid. A natural thing for a parent. This is another thing that sometimes is the most frustrating part of all. When you've got to listen to a Northern Ireland politician, or even worse, you've got to listen to a politician from Whitehall, an apologist for state violence, saying that the blame lies fairly and squarely on the shoulders of the parents. This is so hard to take after you've witnessed at first hand the brutality of the state, to try and shift the emphasis from their own acts onto people that are utterly, completely innocent of any kind of irresponsibility. In fact, we were so afraid that quite often, because I'm aware that boys of 15, boys of 16, no work, no prospects of work, growing up in an area of possibly 70% male unemployment. I would be totally aware of the possibility of that child, through boredom, through frustration, being drawn into a situation that seemed to their young eyes exciting and vital and energetic. But being afraid of that, I would quite often shake his hands. Fear that he was involved. But as I say, to our minds, there was never any evidence. But having said that, I've listened to all the statements of the eyewitnesses who were there, that saw what happened. And there's no question that Paul was throwing stones. There's no question that at least 2 windows were broken. No, there was no petrol bombs. No. There were no acid bombs. There were no nail bombs. There were 4 youths throwing stones. The other 3 youths retreated, and Paul was left on his own. 4 fully armed and heavily protected policemen burst from the doorway, and from a range of varying estimates, as is inevitable with various accounts, ranges varying from 5 yards to 15 yards. They aimed a gun at his head and they shot him.
Julie Livingston, aged 14, died on the 13th of May 1981 after being struck by a plastic round. Following the death of hunger striker Francis Hughes, a group of people, mainly women and children, were banging bin lids in protest. 2 British Army Saladin armoured vehicles come up the road. As people ran for cover, plastic bullets were fired from the Saladin. Julie was returning from an errand with a friend in the Lenadoona area of West Belfast. As they drew near the incident, one of the bullets struck Julie on the head, and she died the following day. Her sister and mother, Elizabeth and Bernadette.
There were statements read out from the soldiers, and they were just, it seemed to us that they were being accepted as being the truth, were the witnesses who had come forward, and the witnesses had been warned when they went forward and when they came forward initially to Woodburn police station that they could be prosecuted as rioters. They were being questioned, really, making them out that they were telling lies. And we had no one there to speak for us. We were sitting there helpless. So I just felt I had to say something, and I stood up and just said, look, I would like to know why this is happening, why this QC is making people that we say is telling the truth out to be liars, and why we haven't got a representative here, why we have no one to speak for us. So the coroner said then, why have you no one here? And I said, because we were informed that we couldn't have anybody to represent us. So there was a lot of mumbling and talking, and he asked me again then, did we want someone? And I said yes, we would, because this was the final thing that we could do. We couldn't do anything else to clear Julie's name, that we would like someone there to speak for us. So then he said, right, I'll adjourn it until you can get a legal representative. So then we went ahead, and it was very painful, it's very painful even talking about it now, but it was more painful then. All we wanted was to get it over with. We kept thinking, that this was something that really hurt my mother very badly, and we wanted to get it over with, but there again, we didn't care how long it took, as long as we could get her name cleared.
A week after Julie's death, Carol Ann Kelly, aged 12, died. She had been struck on the head by a plastic bullet on Tuesday the 19th of May 1981, fired by British soldiers. Her mother, Mrs. Kelly.
It was Tuesday night, the 19th of May, 1981, and Carol Ann had went to the shop up. There's a wee corner shop at the top of the street, and she went up for a pint of milk for a neighbour. And she was away a good half an hour, and I started to get anxious about her, because I told her to come home because we were going to bed early that night. At that particular time they were waiting on, there was the hunger strikers were dying, and I didn't like the children out, late at night, though it was a beautiful night. So I had the other wee ones, Susan, Kathleen and James, and I took them on up the stairs, and they were sitting on the bedroom floor colouring in paints. And I started to look out the window. You can look straight up the street from my window. And I started to look out the window, and I seen Carol Ann coming down the street, and I said, oh, here she's coming now. And just at the top of the road, the jeeps started to come in. There must have been 5 or 6 jeeps came in, or Saracens or whatever they are. And they come flying down the road. Well, I didn't pay any attention to them, but Carol Ann had reached the neighbour's house next door. That's just directly beside me. And she turned round, she must have been going to speak to the neighbour. By that time the jeep had come just facing the green, where I could see them directly, and I seen the jeep sort of slowing down and the gun gone up, the plastic bullet gun gone up. Of course I never thought nothing of that either, because that's usual, they point the guns when they're going around. But then I heard the bang, and I seen the smoke coming out of the gun, and I couldn't take it in, and I looked round to see where Carol Ann was, and Carol Ann was just falling on her back. She went straight down her back with a bottle of milk in her hand. It wasn't even a bottle of milk, it was a carton of milk in a wee plastic bag. And I stood for a minute or two because I couldn't take it in. And my other son, Mark, was coming running down the street, and I heard him shout, no, they've shot our Carol Ann, they've shot our Carol Ann. Well, I jumped then, and I pulled on my coat. I had my night dress and all, and I pulled on a coat, and I flew down and out onto the street. Well, the neighbour standing at the door, she had come running out with a towel, and 2 or 3 other people had gathered. And I knelt down beside her, but she wasn't conscious, the child. And another jeep had come round by this time, And they stopped at the bottom of the green too, and they jumped out of the jeep, the soldiers, and they run up the green, and one of them turned around and he threw his gun to the one coming behind. And the other two come behind that, they threw their gun on the ground. And he turned around and he says, "Oh my God, it's only a little girl. It's only a little girl." And he come running over. Well, the neighbours started to shout then, "Have you not done enough? If she's not, don't put your English hands on her," and this, you know. And I says, "Oh my God, if he can help her, let him help her." He says, "I'm a medic, maybe I can do something for her." And he took something, a pack or something out of his, must have been something on his back, and he put it on the back of her head. Well, the other jeep that had shot her, the first soldiers that had shot her, had went out and were on the road out of the estate, and they stopped the ambulance coming in. Some neighbour must have rang the ambulance. And they told the ambulance men to turn back because it was a false alarm. But the ambulance, some youngster going across said, "No, Caroline Kelly's been shot and she's dead." And the ambulance man says, "We'll go on round and have a look." So they come round and one looked at the other, soldier looked at the ambulance man, and there was not much they could do for Caroline. So put her in the ambulance and took her to the Royal. And they've done an exploratory operation, they said, because she was too far gone for to do really anything. And they put her on the life support, the kidney machine. She was on the heart machine. That's just the way she lived from Tuesday to Friday at 5 o'clock. And she took an infection in the chest. And they had to take her off the drugs that they had her on to keep the brain from swelling. So once that, the doctor said it was only a matter of time. She lived about an hour after that.
Henry Duffy, aged 45, died on the 22nd of May, 1981. Henry Duffy was struck by 2 plastic bullets, one on the chest and one on the left temple. He was returning from a city centre pub to his home in the Cregan area of Derry when he got caught up in rioting, which was going on in the Bogside in the wake of hunger striker Patsy O'Hara's death. Known as Harry Dundalk, the town he originated from, he was a scrap dealer by trade and was a familiar sight, pushing a wheelbarrow and blowing a whistle in the Cregan estate. Harry, a widower, left 7 children. On the 9th of July 1981, Nora McCabe was hit on the head by a plastic bullet when out buying cigarettes. The round was fired from a range of 6 feet. Inspector Crutchley was the officer in charge in the RUC vehicle which discharged the fatal bullet. Nora left 3 children, her husband Jim.
After the inquest on Nora's death, or even coming up to the inquest on Nora's death, I was thought for a long time, and thought many times, how the RUC were going to explain away their action in shooting Nora in the back of the head that morning. And when they gave their explanation of the events of that morning, of course it was proven at the inquest, and the jury's verdict, in fact, stated that they fired their plastic bullet into Linton Street when there was no legitimate target there to be fired at. There was no rioting going on, and there were no petrol bombs thrown at them. So I wondered how on earth they were going to explain away this action, and the fact that it had been proved at the inquest, mainly by the fact that we were fortunate enough to get our hands on a videotape of the actual shooting, which was a mainstay of our evidence and was a central and turning point in the inquest. Because the evidence given by the RUC stated that they didn't, in fact, fire any rubber bullets or plastic bullets into Linton Street. In fact, they weren't. They passed on. They said they passed on by Linton Street, and all their plastic bullets that were fired in Clonard Street and other streets in the area. So when our evidence was given in the form of a witness, an eyewitness, and the videotape, it was proven beyond any doubt in my eyes that the police, the RUC, had in fact, in the 2 years since it had happened, up until the time of the inquest, had concocted a story of lies and had in fact perjured themselves at the inquest. And after the inquest, I wondered what action was going to be taken. Would the Director of Public Prosecutions change his mind and, in fact, bring charges against all the officers of the RUC concerned, including the Assistant Chief Constable, Crutchley, for both perjury and to charge him, in fact, with the killing of Nora. An inquest jury returns its verdict, states that they have told lies in court. Their story isn't believed by them, the inquest jury, and so they snub their noses at the jury, who are in fact the people of Northern Ireland. That's where the jury's taken from. So the people of Northern Ireland, in fact, don't matter to that extent that they should take into consideration the verdict that Nora was unlawfully, in my eyes, killed, if not murdered.
Peter Docherty was watching a riot from his kitchen window on the second floor of the Divis Flats complex in Belfast. Peter, who was 40 years old, told the two other people in the room to move away from the open window as British soldiers were firing plastic bullets at the flats. As he moved to close the window, he was struck on the head by a plastic bullet. He died a week later. Peter McGuinness was hit on the chest by a plastic bullet at point-blank range soon after midnight on Sunday the 9th of August 1981. A local community worker, he had come out of his house to separate a faction fight between youths. Peter worked immediately next door as a voluntary worker at the community centre and knew most of the kids. He was concerned that petrol bombs could set fire to nearby buildings. An RUC Land Rover approached and the youths ran off. As it drew alongside Peter, a plastic round was fired at point-blank range. His wife, Isabel McGuinness.
The early hours of the 9th of August, there was a bit of a riot going on, and just outside our door, we live on the shore road, and Peter and I were out trying to calm it down, the young lads and that, you know. And the cops earlier on had fired plastic bullets at the bottom of the mill road, which is about 200 yards down the road from where we are. And then there was a few Land Rovers up and down, and the wee boys were throwing stones and petrol bombs and this and that and the other. So we were been in and out a few times, and where we are in the front of the road, there's a big tree in the next house to us. So one of these petrol bombs hit the tree, and I got quite frightened that our house maybe going to go up, maybe with 5 kids in there. So the next thing was somebody shouts the cops are coming. So the fella that lived next door to me took me by the arm and run me up into the house. The petrol bomb landed on top of the Land Rover. As I was going into the hall of the house, just heard this bang, and I turned back out to see if Peter was coming up behind me. And he just come running up the wee hill, up into the house. He just shouts, "Belle, I've been hit." Just pushed in past me and went to get onto the chair, and the chair slipped backwards, casters on, and he fell on the floor. And the fella that was with him was Barney Cash, and he tried to work with him, but it was just a hole in Peter's chest where he'd been hit with a plastic bullet, just a round mark on his face. So the ambulance came and they worked with him and couldn't do nothing. Peter died about, say, 10 to 15 minutes after he'd been hit.
On the 16th of April 1982, 11-year-old Stephen McConaughey was playing with a group of children around a Saracen army vehicle which was parked across the road beside the walls of Derry, blocking it. They were taking the mickey out of the soldiers, a not uncommon practice amongst children in nationalist areas. They were trying to stick a small Irish tricolour on the vehicle. A hatch opened on the side of the Saracen and a riot gun appeared. All the children except Stephen ran away. Hands in his pockets, he had started to walk away. The soldier fired and Stephen fell. He was shot in the back of the head and died 3 days later. His mother, Maria McConaughey,
told me we got a car and we went over to the water side, over there at the Galvin Hospital. And I seen the wee doctor, a wee Chinese doctor, come towards me, and he says he had a hole at the back of his head. And I says, is there anything could be done? Because at that time I didn't know nothing about plastic bullets. You know, I didn't know how seriously one could get hurt with them. So took me in the wee room and all and explained. And he says, before you can see him, we're going to clean him up for you. So after they done that, I went on to see him, and his wee fist wasn't touched, you know, but all the screen was at the back of his head and all the screen material. When I noticed it was always cold, you know, as if I kept saying to the nurse, no, have him up, put more blankets around him, but she says about the tubes, it was that many in and out of them. And the next thing then, all the family, we went up there and we had to go to the Royal because the doctors at Galvin says there was nothing they could do down there, not for that kind of injury. So again, they fitted me in the ambulance, and it seemed to take forever for them to get the equipment, you know, to go right for him. And I remember the door was open and he used to look like cow. So I went up to the Royal, and the neurosurgeon called me to one side and says that they couldn't operate. So I just asked him why, and he says there was nothing there. And I says, what do you mean nothing there? He says, his brain's totally destroyed. I couldn't think on, you know. I kept saying, oh, silly things going through my head, maybe they can fix it, you know. They can fix mostly anything. But the staff up in the Royal were more than good, you know, and the doctors and even the patients. We sat at his bedside and he watched them getting colder and colder, and the machine beside him, I remember keep looking at that, and it kept going up and down, and they had it like, there was 2 TVs or one, I can't remember. And I says, oh nurse, what are they for? She says, that one's for the pressure on his brain, because it looked like he had some kind of a screw at the top of his head and bandages and all. And she says about the pressure in his head being 35, you know. And they kept checking all these tubes and all. And the only thing, not one of the doctors, when it was all over, you know, would speak out or say, you know, how harmful they are lethal weapons, and Stephen was hit very close, you know, so the force, you could, the doctor and all would say at the back of his head, and yet nobody spoke out about them. Everybody says, oh, why, they're terrible, no, but not one doctor, especially any of them neurosurgeons who know their business.
On the 12th of August 1984, the annual commemoration march of the introduction of internment was being held in Belfast. It's a family affair at the height of summer, with brightly coloured banners flying and bands playing. It was also the traditional time for international support groups to assemble in Belfast. Because of the possible appearance of Martin Galvin of Noraid, who had been banned from Northern Ireland by the British Secretary of State James Pryor, there was a considerable attendance by the international media at the march. There was also a large RUC and British Army presence.
Do you remember internment? It didn't beat us. Do you remember Bloody Sunday? Duke Street in Derry? The show trials? We're still unbeaten. When this demonstration is finished, we will form up, we will link arms, and we will quietly and without violence march back down our road again.
Well, Martin Galvin is here and getting an enormous cheer. The question is whether the police will attempt to move in to arrest him in this huge crowd and risk the chance of injuries. And the police are coming, and here the police come We hope we don't get hurt. Oh, Jesus. Everybody else, get up! Now, full scale, there's plastic bullets being fired, and they're ripping past us now. And now the battle is on. What's happened here is that Martin Galvin came up on this stand to speak. He never said a word. What's happening now is the police are actually gone wild. It is a police riot now, not a civilian riot. There's no question about that. And the police are now firing plastic bullets left, right, and center. But I have never seen anything like it in the 12 years that I've been working in Northern Ireland. Come on. Jerry, what about, there's one man supposedly been killed. Is that true? Or do you
Well, I don't want to comment not at the moment for fear of raising the temperature here, yeah.
An ambulance is being brought in now to take this man away who's been hit by a plastic bullet. The fear is that he won't make it. He's very badly injured, discolored now as he lies with his shirt open. They've been using heart aiding equipment, and then a drip feed is attached to him, oxygen being pumped into this man in an attempt to save him as he's being ready for an ambulance, which has just arrived. But he looks in very, very bad shape, having been hit by a plastic bullet.
Brenda Downs.
Myself and John and Claire went to the march on August the 12th, as it's usually a traditional thing, and as the weather was quite warm, it was sort of a family outing too, really. And well, we'd walked up the road from the Dunville Park up to the Honorson's Town, and as I say, we were at the very back of the march, and as we were just getting in, I mean, the police started firing plastic bullets, and the crowd sort of dispersed, and we got over to the side of the chapel for safety. So we were taken into the back round beside the cubicles, and there was policemen there, and I said to the one next to me, if anything's happened bad to John, that, I mean, I kill him, because I sort of sensed myself, I mean, that there was something wrong with them being there. And we were there for quite a while, and the nurse kept coming back and forward asking me John's name and address and what he was wearing and different things. And then eventually, as I told her everything, you know, and then eventually the doctor himself came, and he said to me, had your husband any tattoos? So I told him, and then he said that he was sorry, but that he had bad news that John was dead, you know. And I mean, it was just very hard to believe, because we set out so peacefully that day, and
so many people regard themselves as not being involved. After all, it's only one section of the whole community that's been hit or been affected. It's the Catholic side. And not only is it the Catholic side, but there's a further subdivision. It's the Catholic working class side. Therefore, people maintain that illusion of distance, that this could never happen to them. And personally, again, I see this as an issue for everyone to be involved in. Because to my mind, a government or a state or a political party that happens to be in power that is capable of brutally killing any section of society, is capable of killing any section once they oppose their interests. Therefore, the Protestant people at the moment feel it's not their affair. But I'm utterly convinced that if the Protestant people ever feel the need to protest against any impositions that are against any impositions of the state, and the Protestant people feel the need to protest, I believe they'll suffer and feel the same brutality and the same obscenity. I feel the need, and all the people that have helped to make this video feel, this urge, this impulse that can't be stopped, irrespective of how much you feel exhausted at times, or time to let it go. There's still the inexorable push from inside that this has got to go the limits. This matter of indiscriminate use of plastic bullets that kill people, that kill children, has got to be stopped. And people will continue to carry that message in their own way, whether that's through a political party, or whether that's through the use of videos, whether that's through the very great need that exists to bring this onto a greater, wider, a more international forum, to bring this to the European Court of Human Rights, of whose, I believe, Britain has the worst record since the Commission was set up in 1955. It's the European Commission for Human Rights. Of all countries in Europe, Britain has the worst record. When you listen to the people share their experience, you'll know why.
On Belfast streets I've heard it said, they're shooting little children dead. They're taking life hardly begun with plastic bullets from their guns. We won't be kept down easy. We will not be still. We won't be kept down easy for all they may man kill. They tried to drive us from our streets by taking life so young and sweet. They not know will not be beat. Their violence is their own defeat. We won't be kept down easy. We will not be still. We won't be kept down easy for all they may man kill. They tried to make us toe their line by using every type of crime, but freedom won't be terrorized. Their freedom struggle criminalized. We won't be kept down easy. We will